So on our last episode, I told you about cricket camp. I told you about my first few weeks on campus and how I found me a job. I found a way to make a couple of dollars. Now, mind you, 80% of my check would go to my tuition and only 20% would go to me in cash. And when you consider the fact that I had to go to class, I wasn't really working 40 hours a week, that check wasn't very much. But that's the reality. That's just what it was. I was grateful to be able to work. And again, I mentioned to you cricket camp. And what is cricket camp? Well, cricket camp is an activity planned for all freshman students. What they do is they unite the freshmen with sophomores, juniors, and seniors, students who have come before, and they take us to this obstacle course out in the woods. And basically they teach you how to work together, how to unite, how to get a job done by putting your thoughts together and uniting your efforts. And this was what we did during that particular cricket camp episode. It was fun. I remember a charter bus pulled up in front of this campus that particular day as we were leaving out to go to the cricket camp. And as we were loading onto the bus, I remember seeing someone that she just took my breath away. She was that gorgeous. She was that beautiful. I remember looking at her and saying to myself, I've got to get to know her. And which was interesting because remember, I told you about 2 episodes back that the young lady that I was dating when I went to school, I decided that we needed to split because I knew in my heart that she's going to another school campus, I'm going to another campus. We would eventually meet others who would take our attentions away from each other. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, when this young lady came onto that bus, I was stunned with her beauty. I remember looking at her from head to toe and thinking to myself, I've never seen something so beautiful in my life. I'm 18. It was my freshman year in college. The year was 2001, and we were headed to cricket camp. I remember the first obstacle, I guess if you would say, that we had to encounter during this cricket camp feature was that they took us to an old, decrepit, like a senior citizens home, I guess you could say, an old folks home where they had different senior citizens who were close to death. Now this place had been run down. And so for the first activity, we went to this senior citizen home and we got to work. We started cleaning up, we started moving things around, dusting, cutting the grass, getting the place prepared for another crew of senior citizens to come and lodge there. That took us about 4 hours. We stayed there for that first 4 hours, and then once we got done with that, they took us to an obstacle course. And with this obstacle course, we had to split up into groups. Now, my eyes were on this young lady the whole time. I mean, I was enamored with her. And I tried my best to pay attention to the group that she was hanging with so that I could get close to them. And sure enough, I noticed that she continued to pick a certain a group of kids to do her activities with. So I would get close to them. I would try and get picked by them so that I could get close to this young lady so I could at least get an idea of who she was. And it worked. They ended up picking me. And I remember as we're there getting acclimated on this obstacle course, I mean, my every moment I'm just stealing a look at this girl. She was a Puerto Rican girl. She had dark chocolate skin. She was short. She was about 5'3". And I remember I was just enamored. I was caught up completely. And every move she made, I was watching. I remember as they split us up in groups, I would kind of stand off to the side just to get an idea of which group she would end up in. And once I noticed where she would be, then I would graft over to her side hoping that I could be picked by that group as well. And it worked every time. I ended up working with her in several groups that day. And when we finally got back on the bus, headed back to campus, they decided to stop off at Cece's Pizza and feed us. Well, this was my chance to really get to know who she was and to become acquainted with the crowd she was hanging with. And I remember when we got off of the charter bus at Cece's Pizza, there was a group of young men and young women that she was hanging out with. I went up to one of the guys. His name was Eliel. And I kind of tapped him on the shoulder and I said, "Hey, do you know that girl?" And I pointed over in her direction. And he smiled. He said, "Yeah, I know her." He's like, "You must be interested or something." And I looked back at him. I smiled. I said, "Well, she's a very gorgeous young lady. I see that y'all are always hanging together. What's the deal?" And so he gives me the rundown on the fact that they all grew up in the same academy together, Burton Adventist Academy in Arlington, Texas, and that they all graduated from high school together, and that they are now all in college together, so they all knew each other for several years. And then he looks at me and says, "You want to meet her?" And I'm looking at him with a look of shock, like, "Of course, yeah, I do." But I was still shy. He grabbed me by the hand and led me over there and introduced me to the crew. And I'll never forget the names. Levi, there was Andrew, there was Eliel, Sarah was one of the girls there. I'll never forget these names. Luke was there. And I remember as I'm introducing myself, I'm really trying to keep an eye on her to see what her body language is like, to see whether or not she's receptive of my presence or not. And sure enough, I got around to her and I shook her hand, and I made it clear that she was the object of my affection. Now, I didn't say at that point that I was interested. I needed to prepare myself a little better than that. I didn't want to just come out right away and say, "Hey, look, I'm interested," because I felt like I'd be shot down if I did it in that way. But at the end of it all, we end up back on the charter bus, and I'm sitting next to her just talking, small talk, nothing major, but this would be the beginning of a nearly one semester long journey in getting her attention and persuading her into becoming my girl. Now, mind you, you guys have heard many stories up to this point about my love interest and about women who I had had relationships with. But prior to this, nothing compared to what this young lady was about to put my heart through. Over the next few years, I would be committed to her. And over the next few years, I would learn what heartbreak was all about. You know, it's interesting. When we live, we learn. And when we're young people, nobody can tell us nothing. We think we know it all. We think that we are all together and that, hey, we're going to make our decisions. No one needs to counsel us because we know what we're doing. But I tell you, when I look back on my life, and I'm sure you can do the same, when you look back at your life, you know and understand that many decisions that you made from impulse. You made based upon your feelings, and those feelings that you made got you in trouble. Those decisions that you made through your feelings got you hurt. And this would be one of those situations. But remember now, this was at the early stages of my college career. I couldn't see the future. And because I was so gung-ho about being with this young lady, I could not read the signs. But in our next episode, I'm going to tell you about this young lady, or at least I'm going to begin to start off that relationship with this young lady. And I'm going to talk to you about how things went.